gang, me and Joe V with Balsa USA. Today we're going to get started on actually getting some balsa down on our bench. I'm going to walk through how to get your plan set up on your bench. We're going to get everything pinned down and ready to go, and I'm going to show you how to make those first initial crucial steps. Okay, so you can see I've got my plans all set up here, and obviously it's going to be too wide for my building board I have here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these plans down in a more manageable size. So the first thing I wanted to show you is, so I don't damage my building board, I have an extra sheet of light ply underneath my plans here. So when I make my cuts, I'm not damaging my build board. So this is one of the things I was telling you is a fantastic place to use one of those round cutters that I showed you in the tools video. So what you can do is you can grab one of your round cutters and a nice long metal straight edge and lay it right on your plans. What you want to do is you want to make sure you're not cutting out any important information. So right here, I'm not going to be cutting over any of the lines that I'm going to need from my build, and everything's going to be good to go. The only thing I'll really lose off of the top piece here is going to be the length of the gear, but that's already predetermined by the included gear that comes with it. So you just take your round cutter, making sure that you're on your cutting board, line it up where you want it, and run the cutter down it. And there we go. I have my plans cut down in a more manageable size that will fit on my build board. It's just that simple. Since we're not going to need this version of the plans right away, I'll just go ahead and roll those up and set them aside. So as you can see, I've got my plans cut down so they'll fit my bench. Now the next step's going to be you want to get some wax paper, and you want to put wax paper over your plans so that any gluing that you do on the top won't stick to your plans. So I'm going to grab some regular wax paper, and I'm just going to cover my plans with it. You want to get that as flat as you can, and what I do for my plans is I usually use some of these red handled T-pins. Another quick tip, servo boxes are great for keeping your pins in. Okay, so open this up, get a couple of pins out here, and all I'm going to do is go around and pin my wax paper down to my plans. Again, this is so I don't get any damage to my plans as I'm building. So I don't know if you can see it here or not, but I had a little run-in with the cutter on the wax paper. So I'm just going to tape this down with some masking tape just so it doesn't roll up on me. You can see here I used quite a few pins on my paper. I want to make sure it stays good and flat while I'm doing my build. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at our first step in the manual. As you can see here, my very first step is going to be to lay out the fuselage sticks. So I want to give you a quick tip. It was suggested on the YouTube channel on the last video that you sort and measure your balsa. That is a fantastic idea, but I'll tell you, with this kit, with as little pieces that I have here, I'm not even going to mess with it. On some of the larger kits, I'll separate it all down, I'll measure it all out and label it, so that way I can just grab it as I go and I don't have to worry about measuring it. But for the size of this kit and the small amount of parts, I'm just going to wing it. You can do however you would like to do for that, and it should be fine. Whatever works best for your process is what you want to do. So the first thing that it calls for is 2 5/16 by 3/8 spruce sticks. Now I have those here, but I want to show you something. Let me get this box out of my way here. It's going to be very important for you to get a nice steel straight edge ruler. Not very expensive. You can pick them up just about anywhere. you're going to want to check before you glue. So what I've done is I've already checked these. I know they are my 5/16 by 3/8 inch pieces. So before you glue anything down, make sure you check and double check the pieces that you're using. Again, it's not a huge big deal. If you mess up your measurements and you get the wrong stick, all you have to do is let us know and we can set you up with the new stuff. We do make everything and lots of it. So if you do happen to screw it up, it's not the end of the world. It's not anything to worry about. But if you've got access to a nice straight edge and you can measure it, go ahead and measure it and then you'll be good to go. So what I have here on my first instruction is that I'm supposed to glue in 2 sets of 5/16 by 3/8 spruce sticks. Okay, that's what I have here. So I want to show you something real fast with this. It says to make sure to glue them the proper way. You want to go edge to edge, not side to side. So what you're looking for when you get these 2 sticks glued together is a 5/16 by 3/4. Okay? And I am right on the money. Okay? So before I glue these, this is going to be a critical step. Okay? You're going to want to get your straight edge. Nice, solid metal straight edge. And you're going to want to line this up to where it needs to go. Okay? In my case, because the line doesn't continue through and I want to make sure I get it right, I'm going to place it here and bring the ruler up to it. Okay? That's just to get the ruler in the right placement. Okay? Now, what you want to do once you have the ruler in the right spot is you want to go through and pin it down so it doesn't move. Okay? This step's going to be crucial to make sure that when you get done with your fuselage sticks that they are completely straight. So all I do is I go through here being very careful not to move the ruler as I do it and place pins along the outside edge of the ruler. This way I'm going to be sure that it doesn't go anywhere. I'll place a couple on the ends. And just for good measure, I'll place a couple more. I really want to make sure this stays where I put it. You never have too many pins. So then what I do is, as a test fit, I hold my sticks together and I put them right on there to make sure they are where they're supposed to be. And those look like they're going to be perfect. Now, I want to cover something real quick that I haven't covered yet. So when you get these plans, they're coming out of Menominee, Michigan. So depending on where you're at, this paper is going to shrink and it's going to expand due to humidity in your area. Okay? So, the important thing to remember about building these balsa kits is always build to the wood, not to the plans. Try to stay as close as you can to the plans, but if something isn't quite right, it's fine. Build to the wood. Let the wood lead you in the direction that you need to go. They won't be that far off, but when you get into some of these bigger kits, there's really quite a bit of change between the balsa wood and the spruce and the ply and the paper. So it's best just to build to the wood. You want to build to the wood as often as you can. Don't count on the plans staying dimensionally correct. Also, as a first build, if this one takes you a while, you might start it in the winter and not get it finished until spring. So you could have quite a bit of a change in humidity in your area that would cause the plans to move around a little bit. So that's just something I wanted to make sure I let you know, is don't panic if everything doesn't line up perfectly with the plans. Okay, so now that we've got the first stick lined up straight with our plans, we need to bring the other stick over for the fuse and make sure everything looks good once we line it up. Everything looks good there. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and put a bead of thick CA along here and butt it right up to the other one. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some pins. Once I get it set, I'm going to start in the middle and work my way out towards the ends to make sure that both sticks are on there perfectly straight. You also want to make sure that you glue them edge to edge, not side to side. Remember, you're looking for a 5/16 by 3/4 stick when you're done. So I'll go ahead and lay down a bead of glue. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to get some pins ready to go. You want to do this quickly so the glue doesn't have a chance to start to set before you get the pins in. So what I'll do is I'll just put these pins in here just a little so that way I can grab them quick. You should have some time with the thick CA, but I'd be sure to do this just in case. So again, you want to check the side that you're going to glue to make sure that you're gluing the correct side. Looks good. Lay yourself a nice bead of glue right down the outside stick. Now you can use wood glue on this as well, and it would be just fine. I prefer to use Balsa USA Gold CA, and I've never had any failures. So now you want to take your stick, put it right up next to the other one, and start right in the middle. Pin it right up to it so it doesn't move, all the way down to the end on both sides. I would only go a few inches between your pins. So what I'll do before I hit it with some kicker is I'll go ahead and put a few more pins in here just to make sure that it's straight all the way down. You don't want any gaps between the two pieces. Any gaps you get at this step are going to create problems with your fuselage not being straight and lined up. Just for good measure, I put a few extras in. Now what I'll normally do here is I'll go ahead and wipe off the excess CA if there's any, because then that saves me from having to sand it later. So I'll just take some paper towel you can use your finger too, it doesn't hurt anything. And then what I'll do is I'll just give it a little bit of kicker. And it'll be dry in just a couple of seconds. Now what you want to do is you want to go through this exact same process with the other side. Once you think this is cured, I would give it a few minutes just to be safe. There's no need to rush it. Grab your other sticks and do the exact same process when the other side. Okay, so the next step's going to be to glue in your fuselage floor. Now keep in mind, you glued your fuselage sides down flat, but you want to unpin them and put them up on their edge for the step. So you can see what I've done here. I've sandwich pinned them all the way down, so that way they stay straight. Now what I did was I went through and I double checked that this will line up perfectly all the way down. So I won't have to worry about these moving while I'm putting this on here. All I did was go in and sandwich pin all the way down to keep them straight, lined them up with my plans, and then this right here will be my mark for my floor. I made sure that the pins in the center were down low enough that I could put the floor on without interfering. So I can glue it all down just right here, and it'll be good to go. So the one thing that I wanted to make sure that I pointed out is make sure that on these back pins, you turn the T so that it holds down the rails while you glue this. This will make sure that it doesn't bow at all, and it'll keep it nice and flat. See, that's nice and flat down to my work surface. All you have to do is take your small pins, push them all the way down and turn the T's over the wood, and then seat them a little bit more, and those pins will actually hold it down straight to your working surface so that you don't get any bows along the bottom side of your fuselage. Now the only thing that's needed to do is you'll notice that this piece of ply has a small curve to it. That's fine. All you have to do, you got to make sure when you put it down that you put that curve so it's curving upwards towards you. Then when you weight down the center, it'll hold it nice and flat. Okay? All you got to do is line it up with your floor line here on your plans, which is this line right here. Check the fit, make sure everything looks good, all good. And then all I'm going to do is add some thick CA. I think what I'll do first to make sure that I'm not wasting glue is I'll use a pen to mark the end of my floor tank. This way I don't get any glue down past. What I'll normally do on a joint like this is I'll stop the glue just inside of the line I make. Makes it easier for cleanup in a little bit. So now I'll go ahead. My fuse line is right here, so that's where I'll start my glue. And I'll run a nice bead of thick CA all the way down to my mark. I'll set it in. I'm not going to use kicker on this step because I want to be able to get it set down and then use some of my 1, 2, 3 blocks to weight it. And I don't want that glue to set up with the curve in the bottom. There'll be some steps later I can show you a nice little trick for instant curing on this stuff. You want to make sure that it's all level and all good, flat and even on both sides. Your pen should do a good job of holding that together for you. Oh, good. I'd weight it down pretty good just to make sure that it'll be nice and level for you. And then leave that for a couple minutes to dry and we'll be moving on to the next step. One of the things you also want to make sure you do is you want to come down here and check your level or check your squareness with one of your 1, 2, 3 blocks. Now in my case I'm going to have to remove this pin right here. Then I can check my squareness right here like this. Everything looks good to go. We're all set. Okay, so the next step is going to be to install the gear block. Now on this version for the build that we're doing on the video, I'm going to go ahead and build this one as a tricycle gear. I'll also show the steps for being able to convert it so that you'll have the information for both. So what I need to do is I need to measure back from the front end of the fuselage rail 14 1/4 inches. And make a mark. So right there is where 14 1/4 inches is. So then I'll grab my combination square and carry that line all the way across to both sides. So right here is my line. Then I've got my 3/4 square block. This is going to be the gear block. I'm going to check to see if I'm going to need to sand it some. Yep, it's going to need to be sanded a little bit. So you want to sand it a little bit. Anytime you're doing these parts to fit like this, you want to make sure you only take off a little bit at a time and then recheck it. You don't want to get too carried away with sanding, because it's easy to sand more off. It's not so easy to put some wood back. If you happen to make a mistake on that part, you can always fill it in and make a fillet with it, but it's best to get it right the first time. So now that's sanded plenty. And what you want to do is you want to line this block up so that it's center with this line. Once you have it where you're going to need it, what I would do is I would go ahead and use your square to mark it all the way across your gear block. This way when you go to glue it in, it'll be easy to see where you need it. Now all we have to do I think I'm actually going to sand that a little bit more just for giggles. That fit was tight, which is good, but it was also pushing out the sides of my fuselage, and I don't want that to bow in the center. Maybe just a little bit more. Yeah, it's much better. Okay, so now all that's left to do is put on some thick CA. This is a gear block, so on this part you don't want to be too stingy. Turn it over and set it in place. Again, I'm not using kicker on this portion because I want to be able to move it around if I need to. Good to go. Let's move on to the next step. Okay, so now the next step is going to be to glue in your motor mounts. These are your 1/2 inch by 3/4 by 6 inches long hardwood motor mounts. These are going to go right up in the front, flush with the end of the fuselage sticks. Just like that. All you have to do is put a little thick CA on. And you're good to go. Gonna want to hold that there for a few seconds. And after this dries, we'll do the other side just the same. So the next step is going to be to install the nose gear mount. Again, we're going to do this one as a tricycle gear. So what you want to do is you want to trim the sides down so that it fits. Line up your fuse to your plans and check and make sure that it fits between your motor mounts. Okay, I already trimmed mine down. You'll have to trim off a little bit from both sides. Then the next step is to cut out these holes, but with laser cutting now we've already got these holes cut for you, so you won't have to worry about step number 7 where it shows marking the holes and drilling. They're already here. So all you have to do now is install the blind nuts. So you simply just put them over the hole like that and just use a pair of channel locks to put them in. just like that. Okay, so you can see I've got all my blind nuts installed, all ready to go. Now the blind nuts will face towards the front of the plane. That way when you install your gear block to the back side, it'll be able to pull the blind nuts tighter. It does actually show that on the picture. So now all you have to do is line everything up and make sure it fits. Again, I use a 1, 2, 3 box to check for squareness. Looks good. Now all I got to do is add some CA. I will use thick on this. I know there is some debate about epoxy and thick and thin and CA and wood glue. For me, what I normally find is CA is strong enough to hold most joints. Now, for epoxy, I will use epoxy on something like an installed firewall, but for this plane, we don't really have that. You've got the gear blocks in the front, or you have the motor blocks in the front, and everything should be just fine. This airframe should not take a whole lot of abuse. And to me, with the CA, the epoxy is going to be a little bit stronger. So say you have a mishap, the CA is more likely to break without doing as much damage than say the epoxy would. Now I will show you this one thing. You can see right here from the laser cutting that you have some burnt edges. You don't have that here because these are the edges that I cleaned up to make it fit. What I would do is run some sandpaper down these edges and get rid of that burnt wood just to make the CA adhere better. It's not a critical step, but it does, I think, help the CA to bond a little better. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and do that. All I'm gonna do is just run some sandpaper down it. And it doesn't take much. I don't want to do it enough to start changing the shape, just enough to knock some of that burnt off of there. That should be good enough. So then what I do is I take some thick and I go just around the edges where I need it. Put it in place using the 1, 2, 3 block to make sure that it's square. And that's all there is to it. All we got to do now is let it dry. For something like the nose gear block, I would not use kicker. I would let it dry on its own. It'll only take it a couple of minutes. Just because that way it has time to wick into the wood a little bit, especially with the thick. The thin actually does a better job of wicking into the wood than thick does. But with the thick CA, I wouldn't use kicker at this point. I would let that dry all on its own. And then what I might do is come back after this is set and do a little fillet, which basically is just run a bead of CA down through there, and then I might run some kicker on that just to dry it up, just to give it a little bit of extra strength. It is going to be the gear. It's going to take quite a bit of punishment over the years. And then that should be good to go. Okay, gang, I think that we're going to make that the end of this video. On the next video, we'll start looking at fitting the engine and go on from there. Thanks very much for watching, and happy building.